So, A Night to Remember is the old 1950s Titanic film, the greatest sea drama of all time. For many years, Roy Baker's 1958 reenactment of the greatest sea drama of the 20th century, The Sinking of the HMS Titanic, April 14th, 1912, has been considered the definitive movie version. Based on the book by Walter Lord, A Night to Remember is told through the eyes of crew member Second Officer Herbert Lightoller, Kenneth More, and details the events that befell the unsinkable Titanic during her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York, co-starring Honor Blackman, David McCallum, Alec McGowan. So, when Titanic came out, I watched it 4 times at the cinema. Never really watched it so much on DVD. As with a lot of James Cameron's work, he does sort of Hollywoodize things. You know, there was the love story, he turned it into a bit of a Romeo and Juliet, and then there was like the gunfighting and all that. This is going to be just, well, it's classed as a docudrama, isn't it? So this is going to be a bit more down to earth and just telling the story. So anyway, without further ado, let me now watch A Night to Remember, and I'll return in a minute to discuss my initial views on the film. Hello. So, A Night to Remember, directed by Roy Baker. Starts off, we see Kenneth More on a train with his wife, and he's reading through the newspaper. He's looking at an advert for like a very posh soap that the Titanic proudly is using, and he sort of says a remark to his wife about only the best soap for the Titanic. He says, well, for first class at least, those in steerage can go dirty, or something like that. And there's a man in the carriage with him, and he says, well, it's not very British of you to be running down a great British achievement like the Titanic, to be sneering at it, he says. And then his wife says, oh, my husband doesn't mean it like that. He is second in command on the Titanic, as one of the crew. And then the man's like, oh, I'm very sorry. But I thought that was a perfect scene to open the film with. It's brilliant because it sums up everything that was wrong with the Titanic. Everyone had their faith in this new boat, so much so that, you know, there wasn't enough lifeboats on there. Everyone believed that it was unsinkable, and even as the film progresses and they're trying to communicate with other boats, and then other boats are like not taking them seriously. They must be mistaken. Obviously it can't be sinking, it's unsinkable. So yeah, it's got that great introduction into sort of Britain's absolute ignorance to the fact that anything could go wrong. So very much like Titanic, the film sort of introduces you to certain characters in the beginning. You see the rich folk leaving their homes. All the workhouse children line up the streets to wave him off. Then you see the Irish leaving for new lives. You meet certain characters like Margaret Brown, who is the rich American woman. A lot of the similar characters that you meet, but it doesn't have the love story. You just get on the boat, you see the boat, you hear certain statistics and things mentioned at the beginning, like how many passengers are on there, the lifeboats not meeting regulation. They do hit the iceberg 33 minutes into the film, so it's a real quick run through the characters and some really great shots of the boat, some good sets and some great model shots, some better than others, but I mean, you know, this was 1958. For the time, I can imagine it was spellbinding when you was watching it. So it moves a lot quicker than the Titanic. There's no fluff. It's just all taken from true accounts. And I mean, as a consequence of that, there is things in Titanic that you see are taken from the books as well. So you see things like people kicking the ice around on the deck once they've hit that iceberg. But the aftermath of this felt a lot more frustrating in a sense that no one believed it was going to sink. And everyone, even when they hit the iceberg, there's a lot of people sort of jumping to the wrong conclusions, but not really sort of honing in to the extent of the problem. One of them says, you know, the worst thing that can happen is that we'll have to go back. But it's not until the ship's designer and the captain are going through the plans, and the ship's designer, who is an actor called Michael Goodlife. And so often through this, he reminds me of a young Jim Broadbent. Something about the way he looks, his jowls or something, I don't know. But he's going through the plans with the captain, and he says, I'm certain she'll sink, broken her 5 compartments. And then the captain says, right, we're not going to have enough lifeboats, are we? And he mentions the Board of Regulation were not aware of like the importance of having as many lifeboats as possible. They just had the regulated amount, which would have been fine if they were slowly sinking. But when he says, you know, we got an hour and a half, and then it's like brown trousers time. I mean, this is all facts that you see in the film. They get hold of the Carpathia. She's 4 hours away, and they fly at flares to try and attract the attention of a smaller boat. And you keep going to these other boats. You know, this little boat in particular could see the Titanic, and they're like, oh, look, they're firing rockets. I wonder what that is. Oh, it's probably trying to communicate with another boat in their fleet, you know. And they're sending a Morse code, but they're not listening to the Morse code because they don't have to listen through the night. They just shut off. And it's a catalogue of errors here that completely made it an unavoidable tragedy. There was a quote where someone said, there's a series of things that went wrong, and if just one of those was right, then the amount of lives saved would have been tremendous. But they all just happened to go the wrong way. So again, it's that arrogance, isn't it? So it does deal with the class issue, but not like Cameron's film does. You see a lot of the higher class and they're like, oh, I'm not going out there, it's cold, or I'm not wearing that ghastly thing, you know, and they're very self-conscious. And even like later on when they're in the lifeboats, they're like, a lot of the lifeboats are turning around, and you know, Margaret Brown, the Yankee woman, she's like, come on, we need to get back there. And they're like, we're full, they're capsized. She's like, we've got to give it a try. And then there's a lifeboat that's practically empty, and there's men in it as well. And one man says, we need to go back. And then the other lady says, well, I don't know, we're quite crowded in here and I don't feel particularly well. The callousness, the coldness of these people. But, you know, it's the confusion, and, you know, when they're saying like women and children on board, that all these women having to leave their husbands on the ship. And you see a lot of the husbands are sort of gallant with it. One husband in particular follows, I think he's called Robert, and he's married to Honor Blackman. And he speaks to Andrews, the ship's designer, and he says, come on, give it to me straight. How bad is it? And Andrews says, yeah, if I had a wife and children on board, I'd be getting them onto a boat straight away. And then just sort of says the urgency of it. So it's Robert, he knows the urgency, but he still tells his wife and children, oh, it's going to be all right. You know, he knows he's not getting on that boat. He's not getting off that boat. But he doesn't panic them. He's quite controlled. I mean, there's a lot of characters like that, a lot of noble acts that took place. But you know it's going to get sort of a bit hectic, especially when the captain sort of says, right, find out where the arms and the ammunition are kept. They may be needed for later. And then there is, from that point on, a certain step up in the hysteria and people sort of panicking to go onto the lifeboats. But, you know, as a film, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. It was good to see it so punchy and just so sort of, you know, I'm not knocking Titanic because I do love Titanic, especially what I love about Titanic the most is the way that it's minute by minute, the sinking ship. So as soon as the ship starts sinking in the film, you see it in real time, and I love that. It possibly didn't need like another hour and 45 minutes beforehand, but you know, you can't tell James Cameron to make a short film. But this film comes in just over 2 hours, and it's long enough, it's perfect. And you know, the production values, like I said, the model shots, some look good, some look a bit ropey, but you do question how they filmed this. There's some great sets that they're flooding with water. Perhaps they don't get across just how cold it is. You got to think, you know, they're in icy water, and except for a little bit of white powder that they put on Kenneth More's brow towards the end, they don't convey just how cold it is. But a really good watch. And I did like the end where it sort of says, you know, since this happened, there's always lifeboats for all on all ships. There's unceasing radio communications. There's an international ice patrol. You know, so a lot of things were put in place. And I think, you know, lessons haven't been learned because we still do put a lot of our faith in technology. So yeah, Night to Remember, I thought was a really good film. If you haven't seen it already and you get the chance to watch it and you like this, you know, not like the story, it's a tragic story, but it's something that's interesting, isn't it, to see these sort of retelling of these tragic stories. It's definitely worth having a watch, but you know, bear in mind that 1,500 people were lost during this. It's an incredible amount, absolutely horrifying, really. But yeah, as a film, yeah, really good. Thoroughly enjoyed it.